On the show today, we sit down with Mel Carson. Mel is founder and principal strategist at Delightful Communications, a Seattle-based modern marketing, branding, and digital PR consulting firm. Mel is the author of 2 books, Pioneers of Digital, and a great book on our topic today, Introduction to Personal Branding. I am thrilled to have Mel in the studio today talking about personal branding.
This is The Career Cue, the podcast focused on helping you navigate the signals in your career to keep you growing and moving forward in business and in life. Here's today's host, Dana Redmond.
Welcome, Mel.
Hello. Fantastic to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
This is a great topic. I'm so excited to chat about it. We hear so much about branding. So can you just tell me a little bit, like when I think about brands, I think of Starbucks and Nike, and I can imagine their big commercials and their logos as their branding. But what does personal branding really mean?
Well, when you think about the Starbucks of this world or Whole Foods or Nordstrom, really when their marketing teams are out there thinking about how to communicate with their target audience, they're thinking about the experience that you're going to have with them when you walk into a Starbucks, what that coffee tastes like, when you interact with their Twitter profiles or learn something new on Facebook. And really their premise is they're trying to create an experience to engender trust in their target audience so that you keep coming back for more. The other thing that brand marketers do especially is learning how to differentiate themselves from the competition. So when it comes to personal branding, we see it as very, very similar to how a brand or a company operates, in that you need to think about within your career and your life, what is your professional purpose? Why is it that you do what you do? How do you differentiate from other people in your niche? If you're a job seeker, what are you doing to stand out from all the other people that might be going for that job? And really it's about having the discipline to be able to articulate your experience, your wisdom, and your value to a target audience. And that might be a new employer, it might be your current employer, it might be your co-workers, and it might be other people in your industry. So it's really an emerging trend right now that we're seeing more and more people being more conscious of their personal brand, especially given the fact that there's this fantastic opportunity to amplify it through social media and things like LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, etc.
Right. I mean, it is so interesting that amplification is an interesting newer piece for us, right?
Yeah.
As all of the social media and all of the ways that you can express yourself online to a large group of people, possibly, that maybe before all of that, it was just the people that knew you and maybe, friends of friends or, colleagues of friends.
Exactly.
So, Mel, I think you have a really interesting personal story. When did you first realize that personal brand was so important?
I was at Microsoft for many years. I joined Microsoft in about 2005, and this was before the Twitters and the Facebooks of this world were really invented. Can you imagine a world without them? And I was asked to be an evangelist for this particular business, this part of Microsoft, their online advertising products. So I would go out and speak about Microsoft and what it was doing in the space, presentations, and in about 2006 I was asked to write a blog for Media Week. We called it Digitales. Can you see what I did there?
Nice.
And it was really about helping humanize the Microsoft brand by having me out there talking and engaging with people around our particular industry and our particular niche. And when Twitter and Facebook first came along, I immediately signed up. I was going to a lot of digital marketing conferences and learning how to use these different tools for Microsoft. But I learned that they had a really good effect on the way people perceive me in that industry, because people would engage with me. People would be asking me questions about Microsoft products, tools, services, and etc. They'd be pinging me on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter, and that's when I kind of realized that I had an opportunity to build a brand within the industry to be more, our mantra is helping people be more discoverable, shareable and memorable. And then in 2012, there was a whole bunch of people got laid off from Microsoft, and I was one of them. And the reaction within my industry of me getting laid off was quite incredible, with lots of comments about, why did Microsoft lay off someone who was the face of Microsoft in their industry? And it suddenly got me thinking that I'd done something right using social media, the way that I had carried myself at conferences and networking events and always been available to engage and answer questions. It just suddenly started making me think, well, maybe I could help other people do this kind of thing.
When I think about personal brand, I can understand, celebrities or politicians needing a personal brand, and even people that are out trying to get other speaking engagements, maybe needing a personal brand. To be quite honest, right? But how does that translate for sort of your average person who just wants to get their next accounting job or just wants to get that next promotion at their work?
Well, firstly, the more we do this, the more we encounter people who might seem to have average jobs as accountants. Nobody is average. Everybody has a great story. Everybody has experience, has a story about how they got into their niche, but they just don't know how to uncover that and amplify it so it's more discoverable, shareable and memorable. And so, yes, you've got celebrities, and yes, you've got people that write books. I mean, people who write – I've written a couple of books. I won't deny they are vehicles for my personal brand and my business. But for people who are just looking for a new role, or not even looking for a new role, they're just looking to establish themselves. We get a lot of people coming to me saying, I'm an expert in practical basket weaving and needlework, or I'm an expert in fly fishing. How do I get my experience and my wisdom out there? Because I see all these other people getting invited onto, podcasts and getting invited to speak at conferences. How do I do that? So the idea is to really think about, we start by helping people think about their professional purpose. Why is it that they do what they do? What is it that gets them out of bed in the morning? Because I think for a lot of people in their careers, they think automatically that it's, I've got to get a paycheck because I've got to pay the insurance, got to pay the bills, got to put the kids through school. But they don't actually think about really the root of why they do what they do. Once you've kind of figured that out, then you do what a company brand would do. You think about your vision. Where do you want to be in 20 years' time? How do you want to have affected the world? You might be an accountant, and that might seem very dull and boring, but the world needs accountants, and some accountants are absolutely fantastic. And the reason why they need to think about it is, from a vision perspective, is, okay, I want to make sure that I've affected, 100 small businesses and helped the careers of tons of people within this particular niche or this particular area. And so it doesn't need to be thinking about the day-to-day, but it's kind of just trying to have a vision and then a mission of how you're going to get 20 years down the road and how you're going to build on top of your experience to be more useful and helpful and also authentic in the world.
Right. That's an interesting, just starting with that vision and mission. It feels like so much of many of the conversations we've had here on the Career Q about, how do you think about your next role, or any of this start with getting very clear about that for yourself as an individual, of that vision and mission. So I just want to add there that we get a lot of people coming to us who are, in their 50s, and social media wasn't around when they first started their career. And they say to me, God, if I'd known what you've just told me, if I'd known what I know now, my career could have been that much bigger, that much better. I could have influenced, and my experience and my skill set could have touched and helped that many more people. And so we've worked with some celebrities and some sports people, but I'm more interested in, as you mentioned, average people, to try and help them be spectacular, because everybody's got something spectacular in them. And there are just a few little levers and a few little keys that you can turn in order to unlock that. If somebody's gets clear about their vision and mission, where do they go after that as they need to think about their brand? How do they manage it, or do they need to create it? Like, where does it go?
Well, we do two things at Delightful Communications. What we'll do is we'll look at the infrastructure. So we look at people's social media channels. We look at their different touch points. So do they go to conferences? Do they write articles? Do they have a blog? What's their Twitter? What's their Facebook? What's their LinkedIn look like? So we do an analysis of what we call their infrastructure, because there are so many different bells and whistles and settings and buttons that you should press to ensure that you're set up supremely for success. And then we look at the brand from a vision, a mission perspective, and then we think about that professional purpose. So what is it that we can help people exude from themselves, from their story of why they do what they do? Because I don't want to know necessarily that you do this, this, and this. I want to know how you go about doing it. Mm-hmm. What is some of the results that I might expect if I work with you, say I'm a potential client or something like that. So what is the value that you bring? But also really thinking about the audience, because a lot of people have not been able to define, okay, who is their audience? They think they know who their audience is, but it's coming from them. They're not actually putting themselves in the shoes of the people who might hire them or might employ them or might sign them up as a consultant or might want them to speak. So you really need to kind of come out of yourself and put yourself in your target audience position before you can then start shaping your messaging, essentially, which would be your elevator pitches. What do you do? I'm an accountant. Okay, end of conversation. What do you do? Oh, I help businesses navigate the myriad of red tape that the US government puts there to stop you making as much money as you possibly can, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are different ways to articulate every single thing that you do. So once we've got, the kind of brand set up and then the infrastructure set up, it's all about having a plan. So what are you going to do to get out there? Some people are sort of shrinking violets. They kind of sit in a room, they kind of bash away and do the work. You need to get out there. You need to get out and network. You need to find like minds, and networking could be either online or it could be at conferences or seminars or, approaching an industry body and saying, listen, I'm, got a lot of experience in podcasting. Can I come and do a talk about podcasting to your audience, because I think it will be useful. And we try and help people build a plan and a communication cadence, which might be, okay, I'm going to tweet 3 times a day. I'm going to update LinkedIn once a day. I am going to pitch to speak at a conference once a week. Actually having a plan and sticking to it is one of the success measurements, the first success measurement, because the thing is about so many people with their careers and their personal brands is they just kind of expect it all to happen, and it can't. It's hard work. It's hard graft. It's a hustle. But it takes time. But when you do put the time and effort into it, it will start to pay off. But don't try and be all things to all people at one time. Take little bites off. Have a plan and start executing it slowly and building on top of it.
Right. I mean, that's so powerful, the piece about having a plan. Because I know many people, you see very successful folks, and you see people at conferences, and you're thinking, hey, I know that same topic. I probably, could have done a similar talk, or I could have done even a better talk, right? Or I always think about when I hear radio interviews, and there's some super obscure expert on pie tins from the 17th century. And I think, how did they ever find that person, right? Like, how did you know there was an expert out there about that thing to be interviewed? But having that plan then to think about, I need to get out there. The stuff didn't just happen for that person, is sort of what I'm hearing you say, is that, there's very few of us that just get discovered at the soda fountain or whatever,
And that's the thing I was talking earlier about competitive analysis is there's no point sitting there and saying, well, that person on TV or that article got written and I know more about it than them. What are you doing about it? Go to a search engine. Search for your skills. Search for expert on X, Y, Z. Z. Sorry, I'm English. I get it wrong.
You could say Z.
Okay, good. Search for that. Figure out who comes up. Build a plan around, having a competitive analysis. Find 3 or 4 people that do what you do and try and figure out how you can be better than them. Try and think about how you can build different touch points and your brand to leap higher than them if a journalist or a blogger or a radio producer searches for you. And the other thing is put yourself in the way of that good luck. My wife, Ashley, who's just joined Delightful, actually, she just left Microsoft after 11 years to join Delightful to help us with all our personal branding. My company's now, since I got laid off in 2012, we're entering our 6th calendar year, which is crazy to me. And I keep saying to her, I've just been really lucky. And she's like, no, you haven't been lucky. You put yourself in the way of all these situations and these opportunities. And it's been hard work, but that's where you get the winners and the I don't want to call people losers, but the people that don't win so much are the people that aren't putting themselves out there and, offering themselves up to do podcasts for the career queue.
That's interesting. I love that. Put yourself in the way of the luck, right? Yeah. So there is still some piece of it that is, the right opportunity has to present itself and be available, but you have to go after that and be on the lookout for those and make yourself available to those opportunities when they do come up.
Yeah. And locally, the New Day Northwest. It's a TV show here, morning kind of Today show, but just for the Northwest. A friend of mine was on there talking about Snapchat. I'm not a big Snapchatter. And I suddenly had this idea about, because my book, Introduction to Personal Branding, was coming out, I thought, well, if they're talking about Snapchat, maybe they'll talk about personal branding. So I approached her and said, can you introduce me to the producer? She said, yes, I think it's a great idea. And a week later, I'm on TV, and I've been back twice since. So, it's a hustle, but it's being able to exercise a muscle within your self-marketing brain to spot those opportunities and go after them. Because if you don't, somebody else will.
And that's an interesting concept, too, to look, especially if you're just starting out, to look local, right? So there are some of these, smaller local TV programs or radio programs that are happening. And then from there, somebody can see you and pick you up, and then that's sort of how some of that goes, right? That's how those opportunities just start to balloon in that space.
Yep.
Wonderful.
Exactly.
Well, let's take a break, and when we come back, I want to talk about sort of personal brand within sort of more of a corporate environment. If you work for a big corporation, let's talk about that a bit more.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to check out the show notes at thecareerq.com, where you can also subscribe to the podcast and sign up for our newsletter.
Welcome back. We're talking with Mel Carson today all about personal branding. Mel, as we've talked about, getting out there, getting on some television programs or getting podcast interviews is a great thing, and, possibly how to do that. How should somebody think about getting their personal brand out there if they're in a large corporation? And that's really where they need to get known. It's not necessarily that they're looking for speaking engagements, but they really need their boss's boss maybe to know who they are. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I spent 7 years at Microsoft, so I know what it's like working in a big company and how hierarchy can sometimes get in the way. I think the key to personal branding, especially stepping back just a little bit, is that it doesn't necessarily mean externally. That internally at big companies, it can be hugely important and beneficial. So there's all sorts of ways. I mean, the first thing is just make sure that you're doing a fantastic job. Do the absolute best that you can for yourself, the business, for your co-workers, for your boss, to make them look good. Because I think that there's some people that I've kind of met who get a job and they're already on to the next job before they've even mastered the job that they've currently got. So I think it's important to really nail the job that you've got and then just think about how you come across through to different emails or calls for your time, how you show up to meetings, either in person or if it's, a Skype call or are you fully present? And then think about all those different mechanisms. I mean, my big mantra was always to spend 100% doing my job and getting that right, but then spend another 10% networking or finding mentors or approaching people higher up, the hierarchy, asking them for advice because there are a lot of tremendous people in big businesses who have a lot of great experience and don't mind actually sitting down. I think one of the best things that I've heard, and I haven't done this consciously, but I think unconsciously, is people have a personal board of advisors. So they think, okay, well, I've figured out what my mission is and my vision and where I kind of want to be in 5 years' time. What are the areas of expertise or knowledge that I need in order to, if you think of them as building blocks, to climb on top of these different experiences in order to achieve where I want to go with my career and how I want to affect the world. So you go in with that in that organization and you seek out those people who are experts or people that have a lot of experience in those kinds of fields and then go for it. When I worked at a company called Looksmart, it was my first job outside of. I used to be an actor. I don't know if
I did not know that.
I used to be an actor
Okay.
many years ago, and I gave it all up in 2000 to. I was selling teddy bears at Harrods, literally selling teddy bears at Harrods for 6 years, as a resting actor, and I only had a drama degree, so I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do. So I completely fell into the whole internet scene in 2000. And I just remember that one of the tactics that I had was our company was on the 8th floor of a building in Waterloo in central London. And I figured out that the CEO would always walk in at, I don't know, 8:40 in the morning. And he was very, very on time. You could set your clock by him. So I would always time it, 2 or 3 times a week that I would end up coming into the building with him and getting into the elevator. And I had 8 floors to ask him a question. And that's what I would do. And I would say, Martin, during the all hands on Monday, you mentioned that we needed, 15 clients in order to increase our EBITDA and blah, 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 blah. Can you just give me a little bit more information on that? And he would start talking and then we'd get out on the 8th floor and sometimes be there talking for 5 or 10 minutes because he was a CEO. Nobody asked him any questions because they feared him.
Right.
And here I was, a lowly traffic manager, little revenue manager right at the bottom of the food chain, actually asking him a question. And he was very pleased and happy to answer it because if he was transferring knowledge to me, then that would make me do an even better job. And it did. But it also got me within his peripheral eye range. And I ended up getting promoted. I wasn't being sycophantic or anything. I was just being smart and I was asking the right questions and doing it at the right time. So I don't think people should necessarily be scared or worried about reaching out to people because as long as you have a plan behind it, you're not just saying, can I take you to coffee? You need to be able to say, I have aspirations to do X, Y, Z, and I'd like to, take you for coffee just for half an hour of your time to answer these questions. So at least it gives them something to think about and then take it from there.
Right. I mean, so it's coming back to that sort of a planful thing. And you put yourself in the path of that, I put luck in air quotes of riding the elevator for 8 floors with your CEO, right? Like that was something you consciously did and then executed on that plan and it, paid off for you and was helpful there. Yeah. You mentioned earlier about infrastructure. So do you see that different maybe career paths or different stages of somebody's career, there are different pieces of that they should look to pull on more, or is social media always a piece of it? Like how should somebody think about that, the infrastructure pieces?
Well, the first thing is to think about a search engine, right? 80 to 90% of any purchases or any services that are bought, or anything that's researched or information that's looked for by a consumer is done on a search engine. And it's the same when it comes to people. If you submit your resume to someone, and I've spoken to senior recruiters at some of the big companies around town. In Seattle, if you think of coffee companies and technology companies and things like that. And they'll look at the resume, but they'll also do a search for you online to see what comes up, because they don't just want to see what you're tweeting about and your LinkedIn profile and all that kind of thing, but they're looking to see what kinds of things that you're sharing, and if there's anything nefarious out there, which, hopefully there won't be, but you'd be surprised how many people are not aware what actually shows up for their name. But they're looking not just to see whether you're suitable for that job role, but whether you'll fit in with the company culture as well. So I think the first thing anyone should do is Google yourself or Bing yourself and see what comes up. If your name's John Smith, then Google John Smith with your company name, and you'd be surprised how many people have actually done that, because it's not just recruiters looking for you. It could be your, a future boss internally. It could be a co-worker that's moving to your department. It could be a journalist looking for someone. This is why we talk about discoverability, looking for someone with your skill set, or they've heard your name, so they search for your name. What shows up? It's a bit like a shop front. Those brands and those companies are trying to make themselves look as appealing for you to walk in and find out more about their goods and services, and they want to keep you there because you might spend more money. The whole point of your infrastructure is to think about your LinkedIn, think about if you've got a Twitter account, think about if you've got a Facebook account, what kind of experience people have when they find it. I don't think that necessarily everybody has to have a YouTube channel, that everybody, needs to think about podcasts or getting on TV or, writing a blog. But everybody now has the opportunity through companies like Squarespace to buy your own domain name or a version of your domain name and create a 5-page website, which you can have as a living profile about you, your expertise, your experience, have a resume on there, but also talk a little bit about your personal side. At the end of the day, people are going to hire you. They're going to want to work with you. They're going to want to consult with you. I mean, I even Google my clients to see whether I actually want to work with them. Because at the end of the day, I'm a human being, and I want to have a bit of fun, and I want to mitigate any disasters or any adverse experiences. So thinking about the infrastructure, coming back to the question, LinkedIn is really the number one, and it shouldn't be the social channel that you only update when you're looking for a new job. They've added so many more bells and whistles to it now that it should be a living profile. I have a calendar alert every 3 months that pops up, and then I will go and have a think about what I've done over the last 3 months to add to my summary, add a new experience to it, play around with some of the keywords, maybe add a few new client names in there that we've worked with. So from an infrastructure perspective, LinkedIn, being more purposeful about your other social channels. A lot of people don't want to use Facebook. They're like, no, that's just for friends and family. Well, then for goodness sake, lock it down so no one can see whatever you're sharing. But know that just because it's locked down, anyone can take a screenshot of anything that you've written and share it. So just be very conscious and purposeful that whatever you think is a closed social network, it isn't.
And talking about LinkedIn, I know now it is so great. Like, you can see within your feed, the things that people are liking or the comments they make on other articles. So even that bit of activity sort of lends itself to your personal brand because people are seeing, what comment did you make and where on what articles, right? Which articles did you just share can help build that personal brand.
There's one tip exactly on that in the book called, one of the chapters called Take 5 and Practice Writing. Practice writing in that too many people on things like Twitter or LinkedIn, they'll just like something or they'll just retweet something. The way you stand out is by augmenting it. So retweeting it with a quote, retweeting an article that you've liked saying, hey, I really think that you should read this article because of this, that and the other. So actually augmenting it with your own thoughts, your own personality. And the same with LinkedIn when you're commenting, don't just say great article. Explain why, because that comment is going to appear in other people's feeds. And the reason why we say take 5 is a lot of people just feel that they need to rush it a little bit. And they're like, I just need to retweet that, whatever. Just take 5, think about the language that you're using, thinking about that, how it might resonate. Think about your target audience. Why are you sharing this? Who are you trying, what is the purpose of you sharing this article? Is it to make you look good? Is it genuinely to help particular fans and followers that you might have? Maybe tag them exclusively so that they get a ping that you're sharing this article because of a conversation you had last week. So what I'm saying is just think for 5 minutes. It doesn't even have to be 5 minutes. It could be a minute.
Right.
But just think about the way that you're sharing it and what that audience will be. And I guarantee you'll see much better engagement with those sharings than just being lazy about just liking something or retweeting it without adding any extra color.
Right. That's interesting. And, now we are in a world of social media and, we have sort of a new generation coming up and, people graduating from college and have recently graduated where they've always sort of had social media as part of their life. Where do you go with that, I guess, as I think about, I know I've seen the meme of, thank God there was no Facebook when I was in college, right? So there's some of that piece that as you age and grow and change, now that your history is more online, can you recover? How should somebody be thinking about that if you are a college student right now and you have a lot of fun going out dancing and you post lots of those photos, right? Like, how do you think about that as you transition into a professional world?
Yeah, it's it is a tricky one because us as adults telling younger people what they should be doing, that we're the last people that they're actually going to listen to. But I mean, a little anecdote: I was asked to speak at an event called Girls Who Code. Which is a fantastic. I think it's global. It's certainly all over the US, and it was last summer, and I was extremely nervous. I've spoken at hundreds of conferences, but I had to speak to 40 girls aged between 15 and 19 about social media and personal branding, and I was really extremely fretting about this because this was not an audience that I was used to. And, I have 2 small girls aged 2 and 5, and I dread to think what they're going to be up to at that age when it comes to devices and things like that. So I gave the talk, and they were the most engaged audience that I've ever had. Tons of questions, tons of insight, tons of emails afterwards from, people saying, thanks very much, I hadn't really realised about that. One girl said, I really hope you don't think I was being rude on my cell phone at the back of the room, but I was furiously deleting old photo bucket accounts from 7th grade. And so I think that there needs to be some education on that front, and I hope that it doesn't become the new norm that, in 10 years' time recruiters will be looking up and thinking, oh, well, she he or she was only 15 at the time, we'll let that slip. There are ways of going back through content and deleting it. I mean, it'll always probably be out there.
Right, if somebody's really investigating you.
But I think that there needs to be wholesale education about that kind of stuff a lot more, because we're still seeing all kinds of nightmare situations happening. It kind of hits the press, and it's not it's not nice. It's not good. Especially as, we were all young once and probably did some crazy things. So,
oh, never me. Angel.
I just think that there needs to be a lot more education. That's something that Delightful will be looking at with Ashley coming on board, is how can we target and pinpoint that audience and bring some really engaging and lean forward type content to get people to really think carefully about what they post and how they post it, because it could affect their careers, in some point in the future.
Right. With all of that now being just out there and easily discoverable. You mentioned earlier, I think 3 points: discoverable, shareable, and memorable. Mm-hmm. Would you mind walking me through those? How do those 3 points sort of hold up?
So from discoverable, we mean discoverable for your name and discoverable for your expertise. So discoverable for your name, if someone hears about you, if someone gets your resume, if you apply for a job, that if they search for you, they find you. One of the anecdotes in the book is I do some consulting for kind of pro bono for startups, and I got sent this new company that was doing this new thing, and I was asked to have a half an hour conversation with this founder who claimed to be a digital marketing guru, expert, blah, 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 blah. And he had a very unique name, and I searched for him, and it was crickets. There was nothing there. His LinkedIn was, tumbleweeds. He had no Twitter account, no Instagram, and the bio on their website didn't say anything about him. And I said, if I'm an investor and I've only got 3 seconds to think about you before I hand $10 million to somebody else because I've screened you and you don't show up, and there's nothing about you that says that you're an expert in digital marketing because you can't even get your LinkedIn right.
Right.
What do you think is going to happen? He was absolutely mortified because, again, investors or HR directors or recruitment directors, they're not the ones searching for you. It's junior people who are just going to do what they're told, and they're going to search for you, and then you're out the window. So discoverable for your name, but then thinking about being discoverable for your expertise. So personal branding expert. If you search Google for that, I'm going to come up because I actually pay Google AdWords like 20 cents a click if someone searches for that and clicks on the link and comes through to my website. But then on things like LinkedIn, again, people are going to search for skills and expertise as well as different people's names. Mm-hmm. So making sure that your LinkedIn is up to date and is using different keywords. So it's taking that kind of search mindset and thinking about, okay, I'm an expert in fly fishing. What would people be searching for in order to find my skill set, and what shows up if people will search my name? That's discoverable. Shareable is what kind of content are you putting out there? Are you just that retweeter or that liker, or are you writing articles? Are you writing blog posts? Are you sharing good stuff? And when it comes to content, we have an acronym called AURA, because you're trying to increase the halo effect. You can see what I've done there as well with AURA.
Marketing.
And that is where you're thinking about content that's authentic, that's useful, that's relevant to that audience, but also that's actionable. Because at the end of the day, you want people to be spending time with your brand. And then the memorable bit is really those two put together, that if you spend enough time, they become memorable, and you become memorable for your niche and your expertise a couple of months later, 5 years later, 10 years later. In the case of some of our most recent clients, we're picking them up from people that I'd met and worked with 10 years ago. But because I've still had this brand and this presence out there, that I'm easily discoverable, I've been memorable. Mm-hmm. And just at the point 10 years later where they need my skill set or our company's services, we're the obvious choice. They don't need to look anywhere else. That's what we mean about that mantra of being discoverable, shareable, and memorable.
This is incredible, Mel. This has been fantastic, and it gives me lots of to-dos, actually, for my own personal brand and for the Career Q. I've been furiously taking notes.
I'm more than happy to give you a free consultation.
I love that. I'm going to take you up on that now. And then we could do a before and after, maybe. That's the...
Oh, are you sure? Is that going to... Okay. Yes, let's do that.
Love it. Well, let's move into some of the questions that we ask all of our guests around here. Mel, what was your first job?
My first real job was packing boxes for a company called Goodman's Stereos. And I used to cycle about 3 miles a day to get to this warehouse, and these stereos and CD players and things like that would come off a shelf, and I would put them on a conveyor belt and sell them. My first entrepreneurship, though, was actually I used to go fishing, and I used to work out that I lived in Portsmouth in the south of England, and I worked out that if I used these little rubber eels an hour before high tide and an hour afterwards, I would catch these fish called pollock, and they were only about £1/2, and I would go down and I would fish for these things, and I'd bring in 3 or 4 of them, then I'd get on my bike, ride into town to the local Indian restaurant and sell them for a couple of pounds to the Indian restaurant, who would then, I think, pass them off as cod or something like that. But yeah, packing boxes, listening to, I think it was when Buster, Phil Collins' movie came out, so there was a lot of groovy kind of love going on. But I loved it, and I learnt a lot about how to turn up to work on time, how hard work and hard graft, and also how to work with other people who were quite happy doing that kind of role, and they were very much salt of the earth. So I learnt from a very early professional age not to be judgmental about, your kind of blue-collar workers or whatever, but realise that they had a very, very special part to play in business and in industry.
Right. And it's so interesting, some of the earliest jobs you had, right, your first job, some of it is just you got to show up for work. It's just that commitment that you get there, you do the job, and then you can be done, but you've got to show up, right? And that, I think, has so much value as you carry forward into your career of just, you got to show up. You got to be there. You got to put yourself in the path of that luck.
Yep.
So I love that. So have you read or listened to anything lately that you would recommend for others?
It kind of is to do with career and job and professional stuff, but my wife and I went to see a nutritionist last summer, and I kind of came out to my wife, came out as potentially being addicted to sugar.
Oh.
Because I came out and I said, listen, honey, in front of this nutritionist, it's not the girls eating the Easter candy and the Halloween candy. It's me, and I can't stop it. And the nutritionist said, you know what, you're right. It's more addictive than crack cocaine, and you need to watch this movie called Fed Up. So there's 2 things. Fed Up, the movie, which is Katie Couric, that talks about dispelling the myths around fat making us fat, and that it's actually sugar. Added sugar to yogurts and juice and mochas and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely horrible. So we read that movie, we watched that movie, and then I read a book called Fat Chance, which is around the similar things. And me and my wife, we cut out sugar, cut out added sugar. I lost 15 pounds in about 2 or 3 months. I've never felt better. And the reason why I brought that up as something for this show was because I don't have a 2 o'clock dip anymore after lunch. I'd always have a little dessert or eat a lot of pasta or carbohydrates or white refined carb because I thought it was giving me energy. It wasn't. So now I'm powering on through the afternoon till 5 o'clock with a lot more energy and feeling a lot better about myself. So I get a lot more work done. I'm more efficient, and my brain seems to work a little bit better. Given I'm 45, I'm on the downhill slide, so I'm trying to do everything I possibly can to keep me uppy.
It's so interesting, right? The fact that nutrition can play such a important part in how you can perform on the job, right? It's not just, oh, how fast can you run or, about weight. It really can impact all parts of your life, including your career.
Yeah.
So I've become a big believer in that as well, that, the healthier your body is, then sort of the healthier other parts of your life are as
Absolutely.
well. For sure. So, Mel, what would your 90-year-old self say to you today?
My 90-year-old self would say, I was thinking about this a lot in the car on the drive here. I want my 90-year-old self to say, you did a good job. I've realized actually in the past year that I only have so many hours on this planet, and I want to make sure that I'm doing the best that I possibly can. And so I've started doing a course in coaching, in professional coaching. There's a company called IPEC that there's this book about energy leadership, and I've suddenly realized that perhaps I need to optimize the way that I'm performing and my company's performing through really focusing on the energy that we receive from other people, but also we exude. And so I'm suddenly realizing that I need to say yes to a lot more things and just be happy with that and actually put myself out to achieve them. One of my old schoolmasters, I got quite sick with a viral infection when I was taking some important UK exams back in the 80s, and the school said, they said, "Oh, we need Mel to stay on for another year because he's not going to pass these exams." And my father wrote back and said, "No, he's going to pass these exams." And this teacher said he's going to have to pull out all the stops known to angels and men in order to do it. And I thought to myself, that's a good little phrase to live by. And so, I've always been determined to try and have as much energy, do as much positive work, do as much good, help as many people, but also just pull out all those stops known to angels and men so that when I am 90, I can look back and say, and have no regrets. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to look back and I'm just going to say, Mel, you did a good job. You had a bit of a wobbly bit. You had a bit of a waver, but you pulled back, soared, and you've had a good effect, not just on your family and your social sphere, but you've had a good effect on the world.
I love that, right? And it is like you've used your finite time wisely, right? Because time is just so finite. So that's lovely. That's a great picture to have. Mel, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming on the Career Q today. So we're going to wrap it up, and I just want to tell all of our listeners to head on over to thecareerq.com. You can read the show notes and learn more about Mel and Delightful Communications. Mel, if people want to get in touch with you or learn more about your company, how can they do that?
Well, I like to think I'm discoverable, so you can search for Mel Carson or Delightful Communications. Yeah, and just contact me through, there's email addresses and contact forms on melcarson.com and delightfulcommunications.com. And I, always happy to chat to people and make time for people if people want to reach out and have a chat. And, maybe we can help them be more discoverable, shareable and memorable.
I love it. Thank you so much, Mel.
Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. Be sure to head on over to thecareerq.com where you can get more information, show notes, and related articles to today's topic. Also, if you like what you're hearing, head on over to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, and make sure you leave us a rating and review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again.
The Career Q is produced by Lens Group Media and recorded at the Jack Straw Cultural Center in the infrequently sunny Seattle, Washington.
Z. Sorry, I'm English.